them.
Thank you for your answers, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ortitay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. Earlier when the chairman was talking, you had responded to him. We were talking about MA benefits and the work requirements, and you said we were missing out on opportunities because we were focusing on that. What are we missing out on?
So what we heard in this day-long discussion we had with our partners is a couple of things. One, we heard that we because of the requirements, we tend to focus on just that group of people, which, as we know, in SNAP and TANF, we're talking about less than 10% of the population that's subject to work requirements. So it's a small group of people. But we tend to focus all of our efforts on that group. So people who might be experiencing, let's say, domestic violence or a number of mental health condition, whatever it is, and might be exempt from work requirements, we don't tend to focus on them. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there because there's just so many more people that we could focus our efforts there and see more people getting the training or education or employment. I think the other thing that we heard from folks is that, and again, you know, when you have a requirement, you need to make sure you're meeting that requirement. One of the things we heard is that we do a pretty, when we were talking about strengths, we do a pretty good job in placing people in a job, but I think this is one of those areas where we could really improve if we were looking more at how do we put somebody on a career path, and how are we doing more than just placing them in a job, but putting them in a job where they can grow and where they can increase their wages and ultimately get to a place where they can be self-sufficient and support their families.
All right, I want to follow up a little bit on that, because right after you had said that we were missing opportunities, you said you had some big, bold ideas. And I do love hearing bold ideas, so I'd love for you to share some of those, especially if there's any cost savings or efficiencies in these programs that you could provide to us. And even if you don't have, if you're comfortable with giving us a few today, maybe a list later next week down the line, that would be great.
I hope I didn't say that we have today bold ideas. I'm fairly certain.
No, you just said you had bold ideas. And I'm just curious.
What I said, or at least what I meant to say, is I think we need bold changes in these programs. I don't know yet what those look like, but I think it's also not something that as a department alone we're going to come up with those. I think we need to be continuing the conversations we've started with our partners in our work programs to say, what would it look like if we just significantly changed and improved our programs, and what does it take to get there? So we're in the process of having that conversation. I don't have any fabulous ideas to share with you yet.
Well, are you guys looking to benchmark what any other state's doing with their departments? Any specific examples you could cite?
I don't have any examples today. I mean, this is something we've just started in terms of looking at this. We've been having conversations. We sat down the other day with folks in Philly to talk about some of their ideas. So I think at this point we're collecting all sorts of ideas, and sort of nothing's off the table. Let's try to talk about what we can do to improve, and then we'll come back with a thoughtful proposal to you all to say, here's where I think we can go.
Okay, and I know that we have spent a lot of time talking about work requirements for MA, but I know a lot of people, just not on this committee, but in the legislature itself, have a ton of good ideas, and I'm sure we'd be happy to compile a list and send them over to you, just so you can take a look at them and maybe give some feedback, at least start the conversation.
I would welcome that. I mean, I really do feel like this is an area where we can partner, and I think we all have the same interest in trying to get more people working, and that means improving our programs, figuring out how we can get creative about addressing barriers that people face. So I would welcome your ideas and would love to partner on this.
And that leads me to my next topic here. You talk about coordinating with other departments within state government. Do you guys silo information? Do you share information with other departments? Are you working with labor and industry or anyone else in that area?
Yes, thank you for that question. So we have started meeting with L&I, and I think have been meeting with them previously as well. But I think right now, because we have such a renewed focus on this issue and really want to see what we can do, we are coordinating with L&I. And I think that's one of the things we heard when we met with the MCOs and when we met with L&I is you asked about ideas. I mean, one of the things we've heard already is information sharing and data sharing would be helpful. And I don't think we do as much of that today as we don't do as much of that today as we could. And so that's one area that I think right out of the gate we're trying to figure out how we can do a better job, because the MCOs said, look, if I know that you've got a TANF recipient that you've said needs to go to earn or whatever, I can follow up and make sure that they're actually going there. So I think there's partnerships here that we're going to be exploring to figure out how we can do this better.
Right, and later this afternoon, I'll bring up some of these ideas that I have on the organizations. I don't have the list in front of me, and I'll just mention one last thing. It just seems like we have a patchwork of programs across our entire state budget in different agencies, not dealing with just labor, but dealing with how we treat opioids and sharing information across the board. And I know with the emergency declaration, we've got a lot of work to do, and I'll just ask this and I'll finish. What information are you sharing amongst the other agencies in regards to the opioid declaration that we weren't sharing before? Because before, from what I've heard, it doesn't sound like that, if someone comes and asks you for information, you keep it to yourself. You don't necessarily share it with DDAP or labor or another agency for that matter.
I will tell you, in the last several months, I think all of us who are heading up these health and human services agencies in particular, but obviously it's broader than that, have been given a very clear signal by the governor that he expects us to work together very, very closely. And that means breaking down those silos. So I think in the last several months, we've been doing a much better job of sharing everything. I'll give you one quick example. We had the Centers of Excellence was located, that program, in DHS. There's a lot of work around the opioid crisis that's happening in DDAP, as you know, and in health. We had not brought in the other agencies to a conversation about COEs until a couple of months ago, and they were thrilled to be at the table, but that was something that, to your point, we were working on by ourselves, and it's a good program, and we've done some good things with it, but I think we can do so much more by partnering with our other agencies.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.